Good evening, everyone. Am I audible? Am I audible? Let me know if I'm audible, not audible, etc. Okay. Okay. Let's start. Let's start. So, welcome to the last session of the day. I'm pretty sure right, some of you might be thinking, sir, economics is very difficult, economics is too much, etc. etc. This is the first weekend, by the way. I hope you understand. This is the first weekend. Right, before I go forward, I just want to tell you certain important pointers. Important pointers. Not related to UPSC. UPSC will not ask you this question. My suggestion to you people is, whenever you're reading economics, first and foremost, remember this, UPSC will not ask you to become an expert. Yesterday itself, I've told you this. I will revise it. I'll take 1 minute, then I'll start. Right, before you people tell me, preach us, don't give us so much of gnan. Argument is simple. Please check the last 5 years question papers. Do not try to read every topic in complete detail. In that case, you are preparing for economics optionals, not for GS paper 3. So whatever is required for UPSC, just start reading as per the requirement. For example, many of you ask me, sir, what do you mean by that? Right? What do you mean by that? I'll give a simple example. I discussed the concept of CPI and WPI. Right? Let's say half an hour ago, I discussed the concept of CPI and WPI. For UPSC, what I've told now is more than sufficient. Right? It is more than sufficient. But some of you will start reading CPI. You can go to the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, MOSPI website. They will give you 500-page document on CPI. Some of you will start reading that. Do you think you require so much of information for UPSC? Don't do that. You're simply wasting your time. Right? So for UPSC, just stick to the basics plus, right, whatever is there in the current affairs. Right? That's more than sufficient. More than sufficient. Okay? So with this caveat, let me go ahead. Next concept I'll be discussing is the idea of a headline and core inflation. The concept of headline and core inflation. What is this headline and core inflation? Let me start. Have a look at this. I'll take a simple example and explain it to you. Imagine there are 3 goods which are there in the basket. Again, I repeat, imagine there are 3 goods which are there in the basket. A, B and C. The price of A is very volatile. Volatile in the sense what? Prices will suddenly rise up. Prices will also suddenly crash. Right? Any example for volatile commodities, sir? Can I give you an example? What about petrol and diesel? Just think of this and let me know. Don't you think the prices of petrol and diesel, again I'm talking about prices, don't you think the prices of petrol and diesel are very volatile in nature? Volatile in the sense, in one of the month the price of the petrol will reach 110 rupees. In another month it will fall down to, let's say, 90 rupees. In next couple of months it will again increase to 120 rupees, etc., etc., etc. So the prices are very much volatile for some of the commodities. Now the problem is this. If I consider the prices of all the 3 commodities and calculate what is the inflation, and let's say in 1 month, because of higher prices of commodity A, inflation rate increases. Is it okay? For next, let's say 1 or 2 months, because the price of petrol is higher, inflation will also go up. Possible? Just think of it. Is it possible? Yes, of course, yes, it is possible. Now, if the inflation starts going up and let's say crosses 6%, do you think RBI can sit quietly? Do you think RBI will basically say, will sit quietly? Again, the argument is no. RBI cannot sit quietly. So what RBI has to do? RBI has to start increasing interest rates. Right? RBI has to start increasing interest rates. But look at the difficulty here. For 2 months or 3 months, let's say inflation rate is higher because some of the goods prices have increased. RBI increases interest rate, and suddenly after 3 months, the price of the petrol and diesel will come down. The prices of these commodities will come down. And when the prices will come down, what do you think will happen to inflation? Inflation will also automatically come down. Now, do you think RBI should be reversing its policy immediately after 3 months? What do you think? RBI should keep on increasing for 3 months, again decrease for 2 months, increase for 2 months, decrease for 3 months. Do you think that will send a very good signal to the market? Right? Imagine you are an investor in the Indian market. Do you think RBI is sending a very good signal to you? Do you think the policy of RBI is stable? Market will be stable because of it? Answer is no. Some of you say maybe stable. No, it will not send a good signal, my dear. RBI should not be changing the policy so often. Point is that RBI should not keep on changing the policy so often in the market. Remember that, right? Why? Whether you like it or not, RBI is one of the very, very important institutions in the Indian market. One of the very, very important institutions. If RBI itself keep on changing, right? Let's say after 2 months, they will increase interest rate. After 1 month, they will decrease interest rate. Another 2 months, they will increase interest rate. Again, decrease, increase, decrease, increase, decrease. Do you think that is a very good policy of RBI? Answer is no. Right? Don't you think, understand this very carefully, don't you think because I'm considering the prices of all the goods in determining inflation, that could happen? Let me know. Right? Because I'm considering the prices of all the commodities, there is a possibility that this could create instability in the policy making of Reserve Bank of India. Is it a possibility? Let me know. Please participate. I know this is the last session of the day. Some of you are already tired, but please participate. I should be able to understand whether you are able to understand or not. It should not keep on happening like one-sided dialogue, right? No, I don't want it to be a monologue. I want you to tell me, right? So understand this carefully. Sir, I'm too tired. My dear, I'm also tired, right? So again, understand the logic here. Every one of us is tired. Don't worry about it. Focus. Goal is UPSC. Goal is IAS. Keep that in mind. After you become IAS officer, this will be much more tiring. I hope you know that. After you become IAS officer, it will be much more tiring, right? So follow this very carefully. So what I'm trying to say is, I will consider the prices of, let's say, 3 goods which are there in the basket. One of the good prices of that good are very volatile. Keep on increasing, keep on falling. Increase, fall like this. Volatile in nature. And as a result of this, inflation will also go up, come down, go up, come down. And when the inflation goes up, RBI will increase interest rate, and immediately after 2 months, inflation will come down, RBI will decrease interest rate. That will create instability. That will create uncertainty in the market. So uncertainty is not required. Uncertainty doesn't provide any benefit to the market. So understand this very carefully. There are 2 terms now. One is headline inflation and the other one is core inflation. One is headline inflation, second one is core inflation. What is this headline inflation? Whenever you consider all the commodities in the basket to calculate inflation, that is called as headline inflation. I'll give you an example. Under CPI, how many commodities are there in the basket? How many commodities are there? 299. If you calculate the CPI by considering all the 299 articles prices, that is called as headline inflation. Any difficulty? Let me know. If you take the prices of all the commodities in the basket, and calculate, that is called as headline inflation. But the concern is what? Within these 299 articles, some of the commodities, the prices are unstable. Prices are volatile in nature. And as a result of this, right, there could be a violent swings, or let's say there could be very often volatility in the CPI rate. In that case, what is the solution then? Is there a better way to measure it? Of course, yes. There is an inflation called as core inflation. There is inflation called as core inflation. What RBI does, what NSO does is, out of these 299 articles, they will remove food articles and fuel articles. I'll repeat it. Out of these 299 articles, the NSO will basically exclude the food as well as the fuel articles. Sir, why food and fuel articles? Simple. Food articles and fuel articles are very much volatile, right? The prices are very much unstable. So what I'll do, I will remove or exclude food and fuel articles, calculate the inflation for remaining commodities, that is called as core commodities. Is it okay? I'll repeat it again, right? I will exclude the food and fuel articles because the prices of these articles are very unstable, and I will calculate the inflation for remaining number of articles. That the inflation for remaining number of articles, right, I will call this as a core inflation. Now let me ask you a simple question based on the explanation that I've provided to you. Between headline and core inflation, which is a better indicator? Think of it, right? Think of this. Between headline and core inflation, which is a better indicator? Core inflation is a better indicator. Some of you are saying headline. No, core inflation is a better indicator. Better means which will give you quality information. Because the fact of the matter is simple. Please check the last 2 or 3 years prices of fuels. Very much volatile, unstable. Last 2 or 3 years, the prices of food articles, very much unstable. So I'm excluding the prices, I'm excluding the commodities whose prices are unstable, and I'm including only those commodities whose prices are, right, less unstable, and measuring the inflation, hence called as core inflation, right? And core inflation is a better indicator compared to headline inflation. Done? Right, so this is basically the discussion related to core and headline. Now coming to the point. When I say RBI is given the inflation target of 4%, RBI has to maintain the inflation target of 4%. What inflation is this? It is headline CPI. It is headline CPI. Headline CPI, right? Consumer Price Index. Headline Consumer Price Index. Now, very recently there was a discussion. Rather than using headline CPI, we should be using core CPI. The target for RBI should not be headline CPI. It should be core CPI. Why? You already know the answer. I can understand. Why should we give core CPI as an inflation target? You already know the answer to that. It is a better indicator compared to headline. Much better quality data. But now there is a discussion that has happened. UPC can ask you this. Let me give you the argument in favor as well as the opposite of this. Now understand this. Right now the target that RBI uses is headline CPI. And please understand, this is not very new for RBI. From 2016 to 2021, we have already used headline CPI. We used headline CPI itself, right, basically as the inflation target. Now have a look at this. Have a look at this. Why does RBI favor to use headline CPI as a target, not core CPI, not core, headline as a target? One, RBI says, right, understand this carefully, prices of food and fuel have been unstable. And this is nothing new. Historically, if you look at it, always the prices of the food and fuel have remained unstable. I have to understand this. There is nothing new in the instability, or let's say instability, of food and fuel prices. It has been historically the same thing. So there is nothing new that has happened in the economy. It is same that has been happening from the last many decades. Second, right, follow this carefully. Second reason that RBI says we should go with headline inflation is, I've targeted headline CPI for last 5 years. That is, right, understand this. That is basically, right, from 2016 to 2021. And it has been successful. I have to understand this. I've used headline CPI as a target from 2016 to 2021, and we have been successful in containing inflation. Now, many of you ask, sir, how do you say it has been successful? Before the break, we have seen this data. Before the concept of targeting of inflation was asked or was given to RBI, for 5 years, right, the inflation in India averaged around 5.7%. And from 2016 to 2021, for that 5 years, because RBI was given the target, inflation rate has averaged 3.4%. So have a look at this. We have used headline inflation and we have been successful. We have been successful in controlling inflation. So why change? Why to simply change a policy now? We don't require a change in the policy. We will continue with headline CPI as a target. Third very important point. Right now, we have just recovered from the pandemic. Is it okay? Right now, we have just recovered from the pandemic. Right? 2020, we were affected by the pandemic. 21, we were affected by the pandemic. 22, there was a scare because of the pandemic. Now we are on the process, or we have just completed the recovery process in the economy. Suddenly, let's not implement important changes in the policies of the RBI. Let's take certain time period. Let the recovery be complete. Then we can look whether we want to use headline or core as an inflation target for RBI. Done? These are the three reasons which have been cited by RBI to continue to use headline CPI as a target under inflation targeting framework. Any problem with any of the three, let me know. But having said so, there is also argument in favor of core. Right? That is, rather than using headline, RBI should be using core CPI as a target. Right? What is this argument in favor of core CPI? As usual, one of the point is straightforward. Core CPI is a better indicator compared to headline. Between headline and core, core is a better indicator. So use core. That is one point. Second one is, because you are stuck to headline inflation, in recent times, because of external factors, the fuel prices have remained unstable. And that has contributed to inflation. And as a result of that, inflation rate has remained above, let's say 6%. Now, based on that, you are taking up monetary policy decision. But don't you think, right, the decision of RBI, if it is taken on the core inflation, that would be much better. Right? That is one more reason. And because the headline inflation will keep on changing very often because of these unstable or unstable prices, it will create instability in the policy making of Reserve Bank of India, volatility in the policy making of RBI, and that is not good for market stability. So these are the three reasons which are cited by the experts for RBI to shift from the headline inflation to the core inflation. Done? But again, please understand this. This is an argument in favor of headline CPI, in favor of core CPI. What is used by RBI? Simple headline CPI. Okay, right? So that is basically the discussion. Right? That is a basic discussion related to, right, the headline as well as the core WPI, right, in the context of Indian market. In volatility should be there in the third point. Which third point? explain second point in headline inflation, right? Understand this. I believe the second point that I took was we have implemented inflation targeting from 2016 to 2021 and we have been able to control inflation. 5 years before 2016, inflation rate was 5.7%. 5 years after the inflation targeting has been implemented, we have been able to control it at around 3.4%. So it has actually become successful in India. It should be continued. Okay, right? So these are some of the pointers. Now, what is the effect of inflation? If the inflation rate is higher, what is the impact? But before that, right, nobody actually asked this question. I'm actually surprised by the fact. Which question I was expecting, some of you would be looking at it and say, sir, if RBI is finding it difficult, etc., government finds it difficult, why do we target inflation at 4%? Why not 0%? Has anyone thought of it? Why should we keep a target of 4% for inflation? Why not simply target 0% of inflation? Right? Why not that? Right? So understand this. Inflation always is not bad for the economy. I'll repeat the statement. I will repeat the statement. Some of you are answering. I'm very happy. Inflation is not always bad for the economy. Having a high rate of inflation is bad. I hope you understand this. Inflation is not bad. Inflation necessarily is not bad. High rate of inflation is bad. What do you mean by that? If you remember earlier, I told you, if there is inflation, generally the inflation is associated with growth in the economy. I hope you understand this. Right? If there is inflation, generally inflation is associated with growth. If there is a growth, there is, right, the distant cousin of growth, that is inflation. So inflation in the market generally represents there is certain amount of growth in the economy. Hence, 4% acceptable to us. Second very important point, remember this. Rather than inflation, I will write one more term here. Have a look at this. Rather than inflation, opposite of inflation is a deflation. Inflation means what? Price levels will go up. Deflation means price levels will fall. Price levels of basket of commodities will actually decline. Right? What do you mean by that? Imagine here is a basket of goods or services for that matter. Today you are paying 100 rupees for this basket. After 1 year, let's say you are paying 90 rupees for the basket. Have the price levels increased? No. If the price levels have increased, that is called as inflation. But for the basket, the price levels have actually fallen down. So whenever for the basket of goods and services, the price levels will fall down, this is called as deflation. Any difficulty here? Let me know. Rather than the price levels going up, if the price levels will fall down, that is called as a deflation. That is from 100 rupees, the price levels will fall down to 90 rupees. From 90 rupees, price levels will fall down to, let's say, 81 rupees. From 81 rupees, it will fall down to, let's say, 75 rupees. So negative rate of inflation is called as a deflation. Price levels will not go up, rather they will fall. So far so good. Now, if you feel that, okay, inflation is bad, if you come to a conclusion, inflation is bad, we should not have inflation. What is the opposite of inflation? Deflation. Do you think deflation is good? Answer is no. Deflation is very, very bad. Why? First and foremost, whenever deflation is happening in the market, it basically indicates that there is a lowering of demand. There is a lowering of demand. Demand is going down. And do you think demand going down in the market is good indicator for the economy? Then please have a relook at it. Lowering of the demand is not good. And the worst part related to deflation is that if I want to purchase certain goods today, I've seen that in the last 1 month the prices have fallen. I will postpone my consumption. I will postpone my consumption. Postpone means what? In the last month, in the last 30 days, let's say prices have fallen down by 10 rupees. I will further wait so that the prices will fall down by another 10 rupees. Now, don't you think that is dangerous for the economy? Right? The prices will keep on declining. Right? Demand will keep on declining. Production will decline. It will snowball into recession. And that is a precise reason. Understand this. High rate of inflation is not good. A very good, healthy rate of inflation. For example, in India, we have a target of 4%. We say 4% is a healthy rate for us. Right? Is it the same for other countries? Absolutely no. In USA, they say that, or they have a target of 2% inflation rate. Is it okay? In USA, their target of inflation is 2%. They want the inflation to be around 2%. In India, around 4%. Right? Any difficulty here? So far, let me know. Now, right, what is the effect of inflation? If the inflation is there in the market, what is the effect of it? First one, it will reduce the purchasing power. Any difficulty here? Reduce the purchasing power means you can use the same amount of money, but the quantity of the goods that you can purchase has gone down. Right? I'll repeat it again. With the same amount of money, right, the quantity of the goods and services that you can purchase has actually gone down. That is reduction in the purchasing power. Is the first point clear to you people? Is the first point clear to you people? Let me know. Sir, right, not clear, very, very difficult. I'll give a simple example. Imagine you have 100 rupee, right, 100 rupee. Right now the price of the product is, let's say 20 rupees. How many products you can purchase? 5. If the price goes up to, let's say 25 rupees, at the same 100 rupee, now you will be able to purchase only 4 units. Right? So, 1, it will reduce the purchasing power. In fact, there's a technical term for this. Whenever the purchasing power of the cash will go down, again, please understand, I'm specifically talking about cash. Whenever purchasing power of the cash goes down, that is called as inflation tax. There's a term called as inflation tax. Right? If UPSC will ask you what is inflation tax, most of you will simply jump to a conclusion. Inflation tax means the tax collected during inflation, which is wrong. What is inflation tax? Imagine I have 100 rupees. Right? Not imagine, I have 100 rupees. Okay? You have 100 rupees. Today you can go to the market, you can purchase, let's say 5 units of the product. Now you will take the 100 rupees, keep it with yourself. Right? I'm talking about cash here, specifically about cash. You will keep that 100 rupees with yourself. After 1 year, you will go to the market, use the same 100 rupee to purchase the same product. Because of inflation, what would have happened? Now you will not be able to purchase same quantity, right? You will be able to purchase lesser quantity of the goods. Now, can I simply say the value of the cash has not changed? I hope you understand this. The value of the cash has not changed, but how much you can purchase using the cash, it has fallen down. This reduction in the purchasing power of the cash is called as inflation tax. Is it okay? This reduction in the purchasing power of the cash, it is referred to as inflation tax. Next, reduces real rate of returns. It will reduce the real rate of returns. What do you mean by this? Have a look at this. Just have a look at the sequence here. We'll go step by step. And do not by heart it. UPSC will not ask you to write an example for this. They have never asked, they will never ask. Don't worry, follow the sequence. Right? Imagine you have, right, basically a monthly expenses of 50,000 rupees. In 1 month, right, what you will do is, in one month of expenses, you will set aside for taking care of emergency. That is what? You will take 50,000 rupees, and you will keep it on the side. Now, rather than keeping it in the form of a cash, right, that is the worst case that you can do. Rather than keeping it in the form of cash, what you will do is you will listen to your parents, you will take that 50,000 rupees, run to the nearest bank, keep a fixed deposit in the bank. And the bank manager says, sir, dhanyabad, thank you, thanks a lot. I will give you 5% rate of interest. Annually, I will give you 5% rate of interest. So what the bank will do? It will collect 50,000 rupees from you, and after 1 year, along with the interest, they have given you how much? 52,000 rupees 500 or 52,500 rupees. Now have a look at this. Monthly expenses are how much? 50,000. That was the starting point, by the way. Your monthly expenses was 50,000. You have taken 50,000, kept it in the bank. After 1 year, you have 50,000, 52,500. But imagine from this point to this point, that is exactly after 1 year, the inflation rate is, let's say, 7%. Inflation rate is 7%, meaning what? Last year, whatever goods were available for you at 50,000 rupees, now they will cost 53,500 rupees. Now, after 1 year, right, you have kept the FT, you have received the amount. How much money you have received? 52,500. But because of inflation, what has happened? The same set of goods and services after 1 year is costing you 53,500 rupees. Now tell me, is the amount of savings that you have done, the amount of earnings that you have done on the investment, are they sufficient? Just think of it. Do you think that investment that you have done and the returns that you have done, do you think those returns are sufficient for you? Answer is simply no. Now, some of you will ask me, sir, rather than 7%, the inflation rate could be 4% also. Agreed. Absolutely correct. Rather than 7%, it could be even 4%. And let's take that also. Right? Have a look at this. Rather than 7%, if it is 4%, right? Here it is 50,000. After 1 year, will it not become 50,200 rupees? Done? After 1 year, same set of goods and services will cost you 50,200. And you have, correct, right? I'm sorry, 52,000. My mistake, 52,000, not 50,200. 52,000 rupees, right? I'm calculating 5,000. No, 50,000. So after 1 year, 4% means you will get 2,000 rupees. And after 1 year, right, you will, I'm sorry, my mistake here, 52,000 will be the price of the basket of goods and services, and 5% rate of interest, you will get 2,500. That is, the amount of money you have is 52,500. You will be very happy, right? Why? After the completion of 1 year, on that day, you have received 2,500 rupee interest. But in reality, what has inflation done? Inflation has ensured that you would be getting actually the returns of 500. Again, please understand the argument here. I'm not saying that you will not get 2,500. I'm not saying that. You will get 2,500. But if you use the amount, you will not be able to purchase the same set of goods and services at 50,000 that you were able to purchase 1 year before. That is the point I want to convey. And at the end of all of this circus, what you need to simply understand is this. If the inflation rate is higher, from 1 year to next year, and your savings rate, that is, let's say your interest rate that you are earning is lower than the inflation rate, you are not earning anything. Inflation has taken away everything from you. Right? Any difficulty in understanding this? UPSC will not ask you the calculation. Please don't do the calculation. Right? What you need to simply understand is inflation will reduce the amount of actual earning. Right? It will reduce the amount of actual earning, right, that you have done. That is the impact of inflation. Right? For calculations, don't worry, UPSC will not ask you this calculation. Now, sir, is it applicable in real life? My dear, you tell me. Yesterday I was telling you about this. You tell me, what is the inflation rate for last 1 year in India? Think of it. What do you think is the inflation rate in the last 1 year in India? It has been around 6%. Around 6%. If you keep your money in a savings bank deposit, you will get a rate of interest of 3.5%. If you keep an FD, you earn somewhere around 5.5%. Now tell me, today after the class you discuss this with your parents. Now tell me, do you think with inflation rate being higher at 6%, are you earning anything? Think of it. With inflation rate, right, being around 6% and you earning 3.5% on the savings bank account, 5.5% on fixed deposit, right, or 5.3% on the FDs, are you earning anything? You're absolutely not earning anything. People don't understand that. Right? People do not understand it. You're not actually earning, you're ending up losing. Okay? But even then, please understand, the people will keep the money in a savings bank account for two reasons. One, people do not understand what inflation is doing to them. Right? I hope you understand my statement. For example, until unless I discuss this point, how many of you actually knew that inflation will affect your earnings? I hope you understand this. How many of you actually knew that, okay, inflation is not going to let you, right, live easily, so easily. It will take away part of your returns. Right? Those who have the background will understand it. But many of the people do not understand what actually inflation does to them. And second reason why people keep money in the savings bank account is because they can withdraw at any point of time. They know inflation is going to affect them, but they say, right, I don't want to invest here, I don't want to invest there, my money will get stuck up, I would require money at any point of time, so no issues, I'll keep it in the savings bank account itself. Okay, right? So this is the second impact of inflation. Third one, exports. Remember this, generally the accepted principle is, any country with a higher rate of inflation, I repeat, any country with a higher rate of inflation, exports would be affected. That is, if a country experiences a higher rate of inflation, exports from that country would not increase, rather they would decrease. Sir, how? Right? How? What is the logical reason here? I'll give a very simple example. Imagine you're manufacturing this bottle in India. Okay? You're manufacturing this bottle. The cost of raw material increases thanks to inflation. The cost of labor increases causing inflation, etc., etc. Now, when you purchase the raw material, when you pay for the wages, etc., etc., don't you think the cost of the bottle would also be higher? Think of it. The cost of the bottle would also be higher. Now, if the price of the bottle increases, right, do you think more and more bottles would be exported from India? Just think of it and answer. If the price of the bottle increases, do you think more and more exports will happen from India to rest of the world? Answer is simply no. Exports will not be very high. Exports rather would be lower. Right? That is the logical argument. Remember this. Any country with higher inflation rate, exports would also be affected. Okay? Then finally, it will have an impact on the investment scenario. Foreign investors will look at inflation rate. They would not want to invest in such a country. Why? High rate of inflation means they are earning lesser amount of interest. Right? So investments would be affected. So these are some of the very important effects of inflation rate on the market. Done? Okay. So this is the discussion regarding, right, how or why the inflation will have an impact on the economy. How do you control inflation? I've given only 5 points, but let me ask you a very simple one. Right? Don't worry about the 5 points. You will only answer it. You know what is causing inflation. Can you address the cause of inflation? I hope you understand my statement here. For example, sir, right, what do you mean by that? For example, Let's say petrol prices are causing inflation. Can government of India reduce the tax and control the inflation rate? Just think of it. Right? You know that RBI is supplying too much of money, cheaper loans are available. Can you basically increase the rate of interest on the loans? That is consumer loans, not producer loan, consumer loans. Right? Those loans which are taken for consumption. Can you increase the interest rate on these loans, reduce the consumption loans? Will the demand come down? Answer is yes, by the way. Right? You know that the demand in the market is very high because people are earning more, is causing inflation. Can you increase the income tax rate, reduce the demand, thereby controlling inflation? So understand the logic here. You already have discussed what are the causes causing inflation. Can you understand what is the cause and take a policy measure to control inflation in the market? Answer is of course yes. So that is what exactly I have written here. Government will increase the income tax rate. Reduce, RBI will increase the interest rate, reduce the money supply. Right? The government will reduce its overall expenditure. Households will start saving more rather than consuming more in the market, right? And if the demand is very high, increase the overall production in the economy so that supply will demand, right? Supply will match the demand. Okay, right? So this is basically how you control inflation in the market. Now, what are the other concepts related to inflation? Some of the other concepts, let's have a look at it. One is deflation. I've already discussed deflation. What is deflation? Negative inflation rate. That is price levels rather than going up. If the price levels will fall down, that is called as deflation. Right? That is already discussed. Next one is a disinflation. Many students get confused between deflation and disinflation. Understand it very carefully. Disinflation is the rate change of inflation, that is the rate of inflation is actually slowing down. Right? What is the meaning of it? Let's say price levels are 100, it will change to 110, then it will change to 115, then it will change to 118. That is for the basket of goods and services, these are the prices. Now, simple question to you people, is there inflation in the economy or not? Understand my statements very carefully and then answer. If the prices are moving like this, is there inflation in the market? Is there inflation? Answer is yes, there is inflation. But if I find out from this year to this year, what is the rate of inflation? 10%. From this year to this year, what is the rate of inflation? 4%. From this year to this year, what is the rate of inflation? Let's say 2.8%. Now, can I simply conclude, looking at the rate of inflation, that there is inflation, but the rate of inflation or the change in the rate of inflation is slow? I'll repeat it again. There is inflation in the economy, but the rate of inflation is changing. That is, the inflation rate is slowing down. In the first year, it has increased by 10%. Second year, it has increased by only 4%. Third year, it has increased only by 2.8%. So whenever you are looking at a slower rate of inflation, that is called as a disinflation. And whenever the price levels itself are falling down, what do you mean by falling down? 100, 90, 86, 79. Simple question to you people, is there inflation here? Just look at it and answer. Do you think there is inflation here? No, there is a deflation. So in deflation, there is no rise in the price level. In disinflation, there is a rise in the price level. Right? In deflation, negative rate of inflation. In disinflation, there is inflation rate, but the price rise is actually slowing down. From one point to the next point, the rate of inflation actually slows down. That is a disinflation. Okay. Now, just to be very clear, remember this statement also. UPC can ask you this. Deflation talks about change in the prices. Is it okay? Deflation talks about change in the prices. Disinflation talks about change or the slowdown in the inflation rate. Is it okay? Can I go to the next one? I'll repeat it again. Deflation focuses on change in the prices. Prices itself will fall. Disinflation, the rate of inflation is actually slowing down. Right? That is how you need to understand the difference between deflation and disinflation. Okay. Next, core and headline inflation already covered. We have discussed headline and core already. Next, inflation tax. It is basically the penalty as the customer is holding the cash in the times of inflation. Penalty in the sense, again, please understand this. Government will not come to your home and impose and collect a penalty. I hope you understand. Do not imagine penalty means people will come to your home, write a challan on your name and take away the money from you. No, that is not the penalty. You are holding 100 rupees. There is inflation in the market. After the inflation has happened, you will not be able to purchase the same set of goods and services using this cash, which means part of the power of the cash has been taken away. Is it okay? Part of the power, purchasing power of the cash has been taken away by inflation. That is called as inflation tax. Stagflation. What is the concept of a stagflation? It is a situation where inflation and unemployment levels are at a higher. Right? I'll give you an example. Please don't worry. What is stagflation? It is a situation wherein inflation rate is high, unemployment rate is also high. Right? Why this is important? Understand this carefully. I'll come back to these slides. Don't worry. There is this concept of a Phillips curve. There is this idea of a Phillips curve. The Phillips curve represents an inverse relationship between inflation rate as well as unemployment rate. I'll repeat it again. Please remember this. Questions have been asked by UPC on this. Phillips curve represents an inverse relationship between the inflation as well as unemployment rate. And that inverse relationship is referred to as a Phillips curve. Now, why? Why there is an inverse relation between inflation as well as unemployment rate? Let me explain it to you. Follow the discussion carefully. Whenever there is an inflation rate in the market, is it not generally associated with a higher demand? Let me know. Whenever there is an inflation rate in the market, is it not associated with higher demand? Right? When there is a higher demand, what production? What employment? Higher demand means obviously employment will be higher. Again, follow the discussion. Once I come to the conclusion, right, don't get surprised. Follow the discussion. I'm going point by point. Higher inflation is associated with higher demand. Higher demand means production is high, employment is high. Companies are hiring more and more people. A simple question to you. If employment is higher, what will be the unemployment rate in a country? Don't you think if employment is higher, unemployment would be lower? Right? Very logical understanding. If employment is higher, unemployment is lower. So have a look at this. When the inflation is high, what is unemployment rate? Unemployment rate is low. Agreed? Can I go to the next one? Can I go to the next? Inverse, I'm explaining inverse here. Now, second, when the inflation rate is low, Now, simple question to you people, same sequence will follow. If the inflation rate is low, does it not indicate that demand is low? And when the demand is low, what will happen to the production? Production will also be lower. Imagine you're a manufacturer, the demand for your goods has gone down. Will you keep the same number of employees in the factory? Will you keep on hiring more and more people when there is a lower demand in the market? No. What you will do is, you will remove the workers. Is it okay? You will leave or lay off certain number of workers. And when you remove the number of workers from your company, what will happen to unemployment rate? Unemployment rate will increase. When you remove the number of workers from the company, unemployment rate will increase. Now, when inflation is low, what is unemployment rate? Unemployment rate is high. So is it not an inverse relation? Right? Answer to my question now. Is it not an inverse relation? That is, when the inflation rate is high, unemployment rate is low. When inflation rate is low, unemployment rate is high. This is generally observed. Generally, not always, generally observed. But please understand this, there are situations in the economy. There are certain situations in the economy where you will see that inflation is also high and unemployment rate is also high. Simple. Right? There are situations in the economy where you will see inflation as well as unemployment rate, both of them are higher. Sir, how is that possible? I'll take a very simple example. During pandemic, have a look at this. During pandemic, you tell me, what was the unemployment rate? Do you think unemployment rate during pandemic has gone down? No, unemployment rate was higher. Agreed? Point number one. What about inflation? What about inflation during pandemic then? Imports were becoming very costly. Imports had become very costly. Transportation cost was higher. And as a result of this, what happened to inflation rate in the domestic market? Inflation rate was higher. So on one side, inflation rate is higher, and on the other hand, unemployment rate is also higher. And what has happened to growth during pandemic? Growth registered a negative rate or had got stagnated. So when inflation rate is high, unemployment rate is high, growth has got stagnated, do you think you're following Phillips curve? Just think of it. Right? Inflation rate high, unemployment rate high, growth stagnation. Do you think you're abiding by the principles of the Phillips curve? Answer is no. This situation where inflation, unemployment rates are high and right, growth has got stagnated, this situation is called as stagflation. This situation, right, is referred to as stagflation. Remember the terminology. It is referred to as stagflation. Done? Now that is the basic idea here. It's stagflation. Next is base effect. Next concept is base effect. Right? What is this idea of a base effect? Let me explain. Whenever you calculate inflation, you are comparing the price levels to certain data. For example, in the next week, you will come across a newspaper article which says, in the month of January, inflation rate was, I'll just throw arbitrary number here, 6%. Listen to this very carefully. For the month of January, the inflation rate was 6%, they will say. What is the meaning of it? How do you say January it is 6%? Right? What is the comparison? Simple. In the month of January, let's say 2022, whatever was the price level for the basket of commodities, it has increased by 6% in the month of January 2023. Any issue here? Let me know. When you read in the newspaper, January 2023, let's say inflation is 6%. What is the meaning of it? In the month of January 2022, whatever was the price for the basket of goods and services, that has increased by 6% in the month of January 2023. That is the reason they will simply say inflation rate is 6%. But have a look at this very carefully. What if for the month of January, petrol prices were very high? I hope you understand. What if for the month of January, prices of pulses were very, very high? Prices of, let's say, vegetables were very, very high. Right now, don't you think because the price levels in the month of January, because of these commodities, the prices were already very, very high? Just think of it. Don't be confused, just think of it. Right? Because of, let's say, shortage of supply, price of vegetable, price of petrol, price of pulses, right? Price of other agriculture commodities were very, very high. Meaning what? For the basket of commodities in the month of January 2022, already the prices were very high. Now, don't you think that will have an impact on what is the inflation rate for the month of January 2023? Right? I hope you understand this. Don't you think that will have basically the effect on what is the rate of inflation for the month of January 2023? Sir, how is that possible? Because the prices were very, very high for the basket of commodities, rather than cost being 100, what if it had gone up to 140 rupees in the month of January 2022? That, don't you think it will have an impact on what is the calculation of inflation rate for January 23? That is correct. This is called as a base effect. Because I'm comparing it to the same time period. Understand this. Because I'm comparing it to the same time period, the price levels, right, in that time period will have an impact on what is the inflation rate now. Right. So understand, this is the idea of a base effect. Next one is skewflation. What is the skewflation? It is referring to a situation wherein prices for some of the commodities will experience inflation, and in case of other commodities, there may or may not be any inflation. I'll repeat the statement here. I'll repeat it again. Understand this carefully. In case of skewflation, the price levels for some of the commodities. Again, please understand what do you mean by skewflation. Skewflation stands for skewed inflation. Skewflation is nothing but skewed. What do you mean by skewed? Uneven. Right? Skewed means uneven. So let's say for 697 commodities, I'm taking a simple example. Out of 697 commodities, prices for some of them have increased. But for other commodities, prices have not changed, or they have actually fallen down. So don't you think you will see that the inflation amongst these commodities is uneven? Price changes are uneven. That is called as skewflation, skewed rate of inflation. And finally, reflation. Concept of reflation. What is this reflation? It refers to the policy of the government. It is not an inflation. Please remember this. It refers to a policy of the government wherein government will spend money to promote a recovery in the economy. What do you mean by reflation? I'll repeat it again. It refers to the policy of the government which wants to promote a recovery by increasing the expenditure. That policy is called as reflationary policies. Right? So these are certain important concepts. Next one is imported inflation. Right? What is this idea of a imported inflation? Right? Imagine you will import petrol, but the price of the petrol in the market, that is in the international market, has gone up. Last month you imported this at $100, Now you are importing this at, let's say, $120. A simple question to you people, will it not contribute to inflation in the domestic market? Is it okay? I'll repeat it again. The imports have become costlier. And when the imports become costlier, they will contribute to inflation in the domestic market. Now, whenever the inflation is caused because of the imports, that will be referred to as imported inflation. Okay? And finally, wage price spiral, which I've discussed already. What is a wage price spiral? Wages are increased. As a result of this, inflation is caused. Again, as a result of this, wages have to be increased. There's a continuous spiral that is happening. That is called as wage price spiral. Okay, so these are the various concepts. Please go through this. UPSC can ask you the questions in the preliminary examination. Now, before going forward, like I told you in the beginning of today as well as yesterday, let's have a discussion on the concept of base year now. Important, follow this. Generally, books have not provided this discussion. Only at a higher level, many of the books do provide this information. But you should understand what is the idea of a nominal GDP, real GDP, what is base year, what is the impact of it, why do we use base year, etc., etc., etc. Now, before understanding this, let me give you one scenario and I'll ask you a question. Let's say hypothetically, in, right, let's say year 1, Y1 means year 1 or else, right, rather than writing, many of you will again ask me, sir, what is Y1, Y1? Let's say in 2022, you produced 10 goods and the market price, I'll write Q, Q means quantity, and the market price of the good was 10 rupee. What would be the GDP? Simple calculation. What is the GDP? 100 rupees. In 2023, okay, you will produce 9 goods, but because of the inflation in the market price of the good has increased to 12 rupee and you will get a GDP of 108 rupees. A simple question to you people, is it fair based on only this information? Is it fair to make a comparison between 22 and 23? Just think of it. Right? Based on only this data, don't worry about the rest of the things. Based on only this data, is it fair to make a comparison between the GDP of 2022 and GDP of 2023? Some of you are saying yes, but answer is no. It is not fair to make a comparison. Why? To those students who are just wondering, sir, why am I wrong? It is not fair to make a comparison because there is an inflation rate in the market. Is it okay? There is inflation from 1 year to next year. Now, how can you make a comparison when productivity has been affected just because the price levels, because of inflation, the price levels are high, you will end up getting GDP. But do you think that is a right representation of what is happening in the economy? Productivity has fallen. Is it right to basically come to a conclusion there is 8% growth rate in the economy? Now, right, I hope it is clear. Now you know that inflation has an impact on the GDP. Now question arises, how do you resolve this effect? How do you ensure that you will compare the GDP of 2 years without inflation, right, having an impact on the GDP? I hope you understand this. I'll repeat it again. From this year to this year, there is inflation in the economy. I want to make a comparison of GDPs. But if I simply do that, there is an impact of inflation. It is not giving you the right information. So now what I have to do? I will have to take out the impact of the inflation. I will have to simply reduce the impact of the inflation so that I'll be able to compare the GDPs of both the countries. Now question arises, how, sir? what should be done? How can I basically affect it, or how can I basically remove the effect of inflation? That is where the concept of base year will be used. Understand this very, very carefully. That is where the concept of base year will be used. That is, understand the next point here. For comparing the GDP values of two different years, rather than taking the prices in respective year, rather than taking 10 rupee for 2022, rather than taking 12 rupee in 2023, I will take a common price. I'll repeat it. Rather than taking prices in the respective years, I will take only one price and calculate GDP for both the years. Next point, which year price you will take? Now the question arises, which price you will take? Will you take the price of 2020? Will you take the price of 2025? Will you take the price of 2018? Which year price you will take? I will take the prices of the commodity in the base year. What is a base year? Please remember this. Please understand this carefully. You don't have to decide base year. Government will set up a committee. Committee will look at various parameters and decide one base year. For example, right now for the calculation of GDP growth in India, the base year that is used is 2011 and 2012. That is, let's say you're talking about this flask. You're talking about this flask. The price of the flask in 2022 was 10, in 23 was 12. So remove both the prices. Don't take both of them. What was the price of this bottle back in the base year? Please take it. Then calculate GDP. I will show you a calculation. Please wait. Hold on to that particular explanation. Agreed. Now next point. Sir, which year should be chosen as base year? Let me ask a very simple question. How many of you think 2020 would be a good choice for base year? For any calculation. Take for matter inflation. Take for that matter, let's say GDP calculation, etc., etc. How many of you think that 2020 will be a very good choice? Thanks a lot. All of you who have answered is, right, you are saying, sir, it is not a good idea to choose 2020. Now my question is, why? Right, you're right. 2020 is never a good choice for a base year. My question is, why? Right? The reason for that is simple. It is not a normal year. It is an abnormal year. Sir, what do you mean by abnormal year? We experienced recession. We experienced a high rate of unemployment. We experienced high rate of inflation. There was a destability in the economy. Do you want to change? You want to use that as a reference period? You want to use that as a standard to compare with other year? Argument will be no. So understand the logic here. Which year should be taken as a base year? One year where the volatilities are very, very low. Simple. Which is chosen as a base year? The year where volatilities, that is uncertainties in the economies, were very, very low. Right? You have a very good data for that year, etc. That is chosen as a base year. And some of you will simply say, sir, but I'm sitting in 23 now. I'm sitting in the financial year 23. Is it good thing to use a base year of 2011 and 12? My dear, please understand. We adopted base year of 11 and 12 from 14 and 15. Is it okay? We adopted the base year of 11 and 12 from 14 and 15. Maybe another couple of years, we will definitely see Government of India proposing the change in the base year. It will happen. You'll have to wait and see. Definitely there will be a discussion to change the base year. Why? Imagine you're in 2030, you're still using the base year of 11 and 12. Do you think that makes sense? Don't you think much better than 11 and 12? Somewhere a year. right? There will be a better year to use as a base year. So that is the reason there is a concept of base year. Any difficulty here, let me know. Right, so what is the base year currently that we are using? We are using the base year of 11 and 12. Now have a look at the calculation. Please do not by heart the calculation. UPSC will not ask you this. They will not ask you the calculation. Don't worry about it. Follow the concept here. Imagine in the base year, the price of the good is 10 and the goods that were produced, quantity is 10. Again, you do not have to be worried about the quantity. You do not have to be worried about the GDP in the base year. Focus on the price of the commodity in the base year. Okay, right? Focus on the commodity in the price of the commodity in the base year. What is the price? 10 rupee. Point number 1. Imagine, right? First year is 20, 19 and 20, and second year is 20 and 21. In 19 and 20, we have produced 12 goods. We have produced 15 goods. Market price is 12 rupee. The GDP, if you calculate GDP, taking the current market price, it will be 180. I'll write it as step 1. Any difficulty, let me know. Right, in the step 1, the price of the good is 12. The number of goods produced is 15. GDP using that market price in that year is 180. Whenever you calculate GDP using the current market price, current means in 19 and 20, what was the market price? 12 rupee. So when you are using the market price of that year and calculating GDP, it is called as a GDP at current market prices, or else it is also referred to as, right, the nominal GDP. Any difficulty, please let me know. Related to calculation, nothing else, related to GDP here. I'll repeat it again. Imagine for 19 and 20, you are calculating the GDP. What is the price of the product in that year? It is 15 rupees. It is 12 rupees. You produced 15 goods. Then the GDP for that year will be 180 rupees. So whenever you use that current market price, that is the price of the product in that year, calculate GDP, it is called as nominal GDP. Is it okay? That is referred to as nominal GDP. Let's go to the next year, 20 and 21. I have produced 20 goods. Market price is 15 rupees. What is the GDP? 300 rupees. The GDP value is 300. Now, can I say this is also nominal GDP, but for a different financial year? Is it okay? Can I go to the next one? Right, the 300 is also nominal GDP, but for financial year 20 and 21. 180 is a nominal GDP, but for year 19 and 20. Any difficulty here? Let me know. Don't worry about what is the GDP of this year. My dear, follow what I'm discussing. Right? What is there, we'll understand. Don't worry, just have some patience. Right? Is it okay? This is how nominal GDP is calculated. But now my question is it fair to compare the GDP of 1920 with the GDP of 2021? Is it fair to make a comparison? It is not fair, because have a look at this. Prices have changed. Because there is an inflation, prices have changed. So what I will do? What was the price of the product in the base year? Take that. Come to this side of the table. Come to the right side of the table. Right, have a look at this. Base year price is 10 rupee, 10 rupee. How many goods you have manufactured? 15. So 10 into 15, 150 rupees. Right, now 10 rupee into 20, that is the number of goods that you have produced in 2021. That will give you 200 rupees GDP. Now next point. Whenever you use a base year price to calculate GDP, I repeat, whenever you use a base year price to calculate GDP, This is referred to as a GDP at constant prices or real GDP. Done? Whenever you use the market prices of that year, that respective year, nominal GDP. But if you use a base year price and calculate GDP, that is real GDP. So any difficulty in understanding this, let me know right now, because I'll go to the next point. You have chosen a base year of 11 and 12. What is the price of the product in 11 and 12? Take that, use it to calculate GDP. That will give you GDP at constant prices or real GDP. If you use the current year prices, that will refer to as nominal GDP or GDP at market or current market prices. Now, next one. What is the use of all of this? Why are we discussing all of it? To arrive at a concept called as GDP deflator. Right? Very technical, very conceptual as well. Follow the discussion very carefully. Now, let me show you a basic idea here. How do we measure inflation in India? We either use CPI or WPI. Is it okay? How do we measure inflation? CPI or WPI? Right? We use both of them. One is in the wholesale market, second one is in retail market. When you calculate WPI, you use 697 commodities. When you use CPI, you calculate 299 commodities. My simple question to you is, any one of them, either pick up WPI or CPI, do you think any one of them measures what is the overall inflation in the domestic market? Just think of it. Just think of it. Right? Because in one of the basket, you are using only 697. In another basket, you are using 299. Do you think any one of them is measuring what is the overall inflation? Right? Where you have considered all the goods and services. Any indicator like that? Answer is simply no. Right? Neither CPI gives you that information, nor WPI gives you that information, because it is limited to certain goods and services. But in this regard, let me show you a concept called as GDP deflator. Please be very careful. There is a concept called as GDP deflator. GDP deflator is also referred to as implicit price deflator. Right? Be very careful with this concept. Questions have been asked. It is referred to as implicit price deflator. What do you mean by implicit price deflator? Simple. Let's say for the year 2023. Right? Let's say for the year 2023. First, I will calculate GDP at current market prices, nominal GDP. Then I will calculate GDP at the base year prices, which will give me real GDP. Understand this carefully. First, I will calculate GDP using nominal, right? That is current market prices. Second, I will calculate GDP using base year prices, that is real GDP. Now, let's say when I calculated using base year price, the base year price was 10 rupee. And when I calculated nominal GDP, because of inflation, the prices have increased to 17 rupees. In the base year it was 10. Now because of inflation, it has become 17. Now, if I use both of this and use the formula, this one, that is in the numerator, I will write nominal GDP, and in the denominator, I will write real GDP. And let's say hypothetically, I'll take the data from the previous slide here, right? Let's say hypothetically, this is the data, right? For 20 and 21, nominal GDP is how much? 300 rupees. Nominal GDP is 300. And real GDP for the same year, 2021, is how much? 200 rupees. What you will get? you will get the GDP deflator as 1.5. Right? Is it okay? What is the meaning of it? I'll tell you. Have patience. You will get a GDP deflator of 1.5. Now, rather than writing 1.5 in some of the books, they will write percentages, that is 150%. But what is the meaning of it? Right? If you get a GDP deflator of 1.5 or 150%, what is the meaning of it? Understand this very carefully. When you calculated the real GDP, you have taken constant prices or base year prices. And when you have calculated nominal GDP, you have taken, right, the current market prices. Now, don't you think when you make a comparison, right, when you make a comparison, it simply means the price levels in the market have increased by 50% compared to base year. I'll repeat it again. The price levels in the market has increased by 50% compared to base year. Is it okay? Everybody agrees with this? Anybody has an issue? Please let me know right now. Price levels have increased. Understand my statement. Price levels have increased. Right? There are two students who are saying, sir, is it increased by 50% or increased by 150%? My dear, what was costing you 10 rupees in the base year has become 15 rupees now. Means the prices have increased by 50%. Now, simple question to you people. First one, answer to these questions, participate. On one side, you have CPI, WPI, where there is a basket. On the other hand, you have GDP deflator. Have a look at this. On the other hand, you have a GDP deflator which consists of all the goods and services which are produced in a year. You tell me which is a better indicator of inflation. I hope you understand. On one side, you have CPI and WPI. Right? CPI considers how much? 299. WPI considers how much? 697. But on the other hand, you have GDP deflator. Right? Whether you say nominal GDP or real GDP, whatever goods and services which are produced in a year, they'll be counted under both of them. So you have a GDP deflator which covers the entire economy. Now, if I ask you which is a better indicator of inflation, it is a GDP deflator. Anybody has a doubt in this, let me know. Right? And if UPSC will ask you, right? If UPSC will ask you which is the most important, or let's say which is the most better, or let's say which is the indicator which will give you the highest quality of inflation data, simple, it is GDP deflator, because it will cover the entire economy, not just part of the economy, as is the case in WPI as well as CPI. Any issues with this? And that is the precise reason. Look at the first statement there. It is implicit price deflator. It is referred to as implicit price deflator. Now, next point. Many of you will ask me, sir, in that case, why don't we use a GDP deflator? Why does RBI use CPI? Very good question, by the way, which you should have asked, which none of you asked. I am asking myself. Right, sir, if GDP deflator is so good, like you said, which I also agree, because it covers whole economy, right? Basically, it is a good indicator. Then why doesn't RBI use a GDP deflator to make policies? Why does it use CPI? Answer is very simple. You want a GDP deflator, but you tell me, is GDP published for every month in India? Understand my statement. Is GDP published every month in India? Answer is no, by the way. You should not have any doubt. Right? GDP is not published every month. GDP is published once every 3 months. Once every 3 months. That is, let's say, for the quarter that is happening now, January, February, March. This is the quarter. the data, that is a GDP data for this quarter, will be published somewhere in the month of May. Right? So what is the GDP value of this? You will come to know in the month of May. So do you think that is an indicator which should be used by RBI to make the policies? But on the other hand, have a look at this. For every month, are we not publishing CPI data? Is it okay? For every month, are we not publishing CPI data? In fact, the answer is yes. That's the reason I'm saying, read the newspapers. Guaranteed. Right? Next week, 12th, 13th, you will see data on inflation. You will see the data of inflation. Okay, so GDP deflator is a better indicator, but the problem is that we don't publish the data very frequently, as frequently the CPI is published. And that is the precise reason. Have a look at this. The RBI says, I will simply use the CPI, right, data to make a policy. It is available, I'll use it. Okay, right. So this is the discussion related to GDP deflator. Now, before I go forward, I hope your question regarding the base year is answered. Sir, what is base year? Why do we use base year? Etc. etc. Is it answered? Yes or no? Let me know. Now, what is the use of base year? You have understood. Now have a look at this. There was one student who was asking, sir, if I read in the newspaper, let's say, for the current financial year, that is, let's say, financial year 23, the government says GDP growth rate is 7%. Right? What does it mean? If the government says GDP growth rate is 7%, what does it mean? I'll write the numbers here, just understand this. Don't calculate, UPSC will not ask you calculation. Rather than writing 19 and 20, I will write financial year 22 and I'll write financial year 23. We are here, all of you agree? We are in the financial year 23. Now, what was the GDP? Right, first I will calculate nominal GDP for financial year 22. Then take the base year price, calculate real GDP. Same thing I will do with financial year 23. I will calculate real GDP for financial year 23. Now, I will compare what was the real GDP for last year with what was the real GDP of this year. So that comparison will tell me the GDP has actually increased by 7%. Is the logic okay with all of you? Let me know. Right, first I will calculate real GDP for previous fiscal, real GDP for current fiscal. Then I will basically make a comparison. Real GDP has increased by 7%. That is what you will read in the newspaper. Right, either 6.5%, 7%, doesn't matter. Don't worry. This is how the calculation is done. Okay. So nominal GDP, real GDP, GDP deflator, all these are the discussions related to inflation. Now, before I go forward, so the inflation we will say is 50% or 150%. My dear, inflation is the rise in the price level. Price levels have increased by 50%, hence 50%. What is the use of GDP deflator? Apart from inflation rate, GDP deflator is a very good indicator. Overall economy, we will be able to find out whether basically the price levels are increasing or decreasing for overall economy. Right? That is very, very important for even policy making. Okay. GDP is calculating on production method. Then how factor cost can manage according to base year? What is the connection? I don't understand. Right? You already know what is the market price of the good. Use the same price to calculate, right? The GDP for, the real GDP for both the years. Use the same price. Okay. Done. So this is a discussion related to inflation. Now we will do one thing. Rather than taking up the questions, we'll club all the questions of this chapter, next chapter. We'll take it up next class. Let me take up the next chapter here. Let me take up the next chapter. We'll take up questions, don't worry. I'll not skip anything. Whatever is there in the slide, I will cover it. You have patience with that. Done. So the next chapter that I'll be discussing will be fiscal policy taxation. Now, anybody wants what is fiscal policy? I've already discussed this. Fiscal policy basically means the policy of the government of India related to taxation as well as related to expenses. Any policy related to government, right, that is related to taxation as well as expenditure, that is called as a fiscal policy. Right, so in the fiscal policy, we'll be discussing taxation, we'll be discussing subsidies, we'll be discussing disinvestment, etc., etc., etc. Different policies we'll be discussing over a period of time. Now today, let's start with the first part of it, that is taxation. What are the areas I'll be covering under taxation? We'll start with what is a tax? What do you mean by a tax? Let's try and understand that. Then we will understand certain types of taxation system. Then certain types of taxes such as VAT, such as service tax, GST, MAT, GAR, etc. All these are important, relevant for UPSC. Please be very, very careful. Then what are the issues in the taxation system in India? What reforms have been implemented by the government? Then the concept of a Laffer curve. Then, as usual, we will discuss questions. Like I've said, we'll club the questions from, let's say, the GDP, then the questions from inflation, and after this is over, we'll discuss everything, don't worry. Now, let me start. What do you mean by a tax? Right, if I were to ask you, what do you mean by the tax? Many of you will simply tell me, sir, tax is income tax, tax is GST, tax is A, tax is B, etc., etc., etc. But how do you define what is a tax? Tax is a levy that is imposed by the government. Tax is nothing but a charge that is imposed by the government. For example, people who are earning income, right, they will have to pay income taxes. You go to the market, purchase a good, you will have to pay GST to the government. You have, let's say, invested in the stock market, you earn something, you'll have to pay capital gains. Companies have invested money, they have earned profit, they will have to pay corporate taxes to the government. So argument is very simple here. What is a tax? Tax is a levy. It is a charge that is imposed by the government. Now, why does government impose a tax? Simple argument here. Government requires a lot of money for its expenditure. Is it okay? Government requires a lot of money to take care of its expenses. They need money to spend. For what purpose? They want to launch a scheme. They want to construct a port. They want to develop, right, let's say a dam or a tunnel, etc. So for many particular reasons like this, money is required, right, for the government. And one of the ways through which government can collect money is nothing but by imposing tax and collecting the money. Now, I hope the concept or the definition of tax is clear. Anybody who says, sir, what is the tax? Right? The tax is nothing but a charge that is imposed by the government to collect money, to raise revenues so that they can spend money. In fact, I'll give you the latest data here. If you look at the budget documents, the recent budget that was announced by the government, out of total 100 paisas that the government would earn as income, collect money, out of that around 58% of it is in the form of taxes itself. Is it okay? Around 100 paisas, that is 1 rupee, if the government is raising 1 rupee, raising means collecting 1 rupee, out of that 1 rupee, 58 paisas is in the form of taxes itself. So the government is imposing as well as collecting lot of tax revenues from the market. That is very much relevant. Please remember that. Now, what are the different types of taxation systems? What kind of taxation systems are there in the economy? Let's go one by one. First one is a direct tax and indirect tax. First one is a direct and indirect. Now, what do you mean by direct tax? What is the meaning of indirect tax? Let me start with an example. Income tax is a direct tax. Okay, income tax is a direct tax. And GST is an indirect tax. Is it okay? I'll repeat it. Income tax is a direct tax. GST is an indirect tax. But how do you differentiate between what is a direct tax, what is an indirect tax? How do you understand the difference? Simple. Let me explain. Follow this carefully. Direct taxes cannot be transferred. I repeat, direct taxes cannot be transferred. Indirect taxes can be transferred. Right, sir? What is the meaning of it? Let me explain this clearly. Follow this. Imagine you, right, become a software engineer. You are hired by a company. You will earn incomes. You will earn income. So the person who is earning the income is you. And the government will impose the tax on you. And who will pay the tax to the government? You will pay the tax to the government. Is there any problem with this? I'm talking about income taxes. The government will impose the tax on you. You, from your income, you will pay the tax to the government. Now, understand this carefully. Government has imposed and collect the taxes from the same person. Right? These kind of taxes are referred to as direct taxes. Any difficulty? Any difficulty? Sir, any other example of a direct tax? Corporate taxes, wealth tax, inheritance tax. There are multiple types. But any issue with the direct tax, let me know. Is the concept of a direct tax clear? Government will impose a tax on the person, and on the same person they will collect the tax from. Again, it's a very simple logic. You have earned income, government will impose a tax on you, and you will pay the tax to the government. Right? So the tax burden, you cannot transfer it to someone else. I'll explain what you mean by tax burden transfer. Just a second. Now look at the second example. Here is, let's say, McDonald's. Here is, let's say, McDonald's, or let's say KFC for that matter. Government will impose a GST on McDonald's. Is it okay? Or any restaurant for that matter. Don't say, sir, why McDonald's only? I will take any restaurant. You take any example for that matter. Government has imposed a GST on the McDonald's or KFC. Now you will go to the restaurant. Understand this. You will go to the restaurant. So government has imposed a tax on the service provider. The service provider will collect the tax from you and pay it to the government. Is it okay? Right? Imagine government has told me, I'm the restaurant owner. Government has told me, pay 5% GST. But that 5% GST, what I'll do? I will simply transfer that 5% GST to you when you come to the restaurant. Can I call this as transfer of tax burden? Let me know. Can I call this as a transfer of tax burden? So in the context of indirect taxes, the tax burden can be transferred. Whereas in direct taxes, the tax burden cannot be transferred. Right? Meaning, imagine I have earned an income of 10 lakh rupees. Government will ask me, pay, let's say, 1 lakh rupee income tax. Can I transfer the tax burden to anybody else? Just think of it. Can I transfer that 1 lakh rupee burden to anybody else? I can't transfer. I will only have to pay that 1 lakh rupees to the government. So whenever the burden of taxation cannot be transferred, that tax is called as a direct tax. And whenever the burden of taxation can be transferred, that is called as an indirect tax. I'll give you one more example. Imagine you are an importer, right? You are manufacturing this bottle. Is it okay? You are manufacturing this bottle. You imported certain product, but government has asked you to pay taxes because you have imported a product. Now, simple question to you people. You will import, let's say, a raw material, pay taxes to the government. You will manufacture the bottle, sell it to the customer. Don't you think whatever taxes you have paid to the government, you will collect it from the customer? Just think of it. Right? Just think of it. Don't you think whatever taxes you have paid to the government, because you have imported certain raw material, you have imported a machine, etc., you will simply transfer it and collect it from the customer? Of course, yes. So can I say whenever this tax burden is transferred, it is an indirect tax? So for example, a tax such as customs duties. Customs are imposed on imports. I hope you understand. Customs duties are imposed on imports. If you are a manufacturer, you have imported, you have paid taxes to the government, you will simply collect it from the customer when you will sell it to the buyer. Right? So whenever tax burden can be transferred, indirect taxes. When you cannot transfer the burden, it is a direct taxes. Best example is income tax, corporate tax for direct. Best example is a GST for indirect. Okay, that is a direct and indirect. Next one is progressive, regressive, and proportional. Right? Progressive, regressive, and proportional types of taxes. First one, what is progressive? In case of progressive, the tax rate will keep on increasing as the incomes keep on increasing. Simple. Whenever the incomes will keep on increasing, the tax rate will keep on increasing. Right? Yes or not? Let me know. Sir, any example of a progressive type of a taxation system? Income taxes in India. Income taxes in India. That is, understand the logic here. As the income that you have earned keeps on increasing, the income tax rate will also keep on increasing. Right? So, progressive type of a taxation system. What about regressive type of a taxation system? As the income keeps on increasing, if the tax rate or the tax burden will come down, that is called as a regressive type of a taxation system. I'll repeat it, slightly confusing, follow this carefully. Books have not given the examples, understand this carefully. What is regressive type of a taxation system? The tax burden will come down as the income will keep on increasing. Sir, how is that possible? Any example in India? Right, have a look at this. Generally, experts say that indirect taxes are regressive in nature. Indirect taxes are regressive in nature. Right? What do you mean by indirect taxes are regressive in nature? Let me explain. If you talk about direct taxes, let's assume person A is earning 2 lakh rupees. Person B is earning 10 lakh rupees. Now, don't you think the tax burden, the amount of taxes paid by B would be greater compared to the taxes paid by A? Just think of it and answer. Amount of taxes paid by B would be greater than amount of taxes paid by A. Why? That is how the tax rate has been set up. If you are earning up to 7 lakh rupees as per the latest policy, If you're earning up to 7 lakh rupees, you do not have to pay any tax to the government, right? But above 7 lakh rupees, right? Actually, it is a 5 to 10 like this. Whatever it is, don't worry. Don't worry about exact calculations here, right? Imagine B will end up paying 2 lakh rupee tax to the government. 2 lakh rupee tax to the government. So don't you think B has a higher burden of taxation compared to A? Which means, understand this carefully, direct taxes can differentiate between the taxpayers. Is it okay? Direct taxes can differentiate between the taxpayers. That is, how much is the earnings of taxpayer A, B, C, D. I can differentiate, and the one who is earning more, I will ask him to pay more taxes. But on the other hand, let's say GST. Simple question. Let's say GST. Right? Imagine Mr. Mukesh Ambani goes to a shop to purchase the bottle. He will pay, let's say, GST of 15 rupees. You will go to the same shop to purchase the bottle. How much is the GST that you will pay? Same 15 rupees. Right? Let's say another businessman will go to the shop to purchase a bottle. How much GST they will pay? 15 rupees. Now, is it okay if I say, have a look at this statement carefully. Is it okay if I say indirect taxes do not differentiate the taxpayers based on their incomes? And the income is a very important term here. Why? Your income will determine how much capacity you have to pay the taxes. I'll repeat it. Your income will determine what is the capability, what is the capacity of payment of taxes from your side. Don't you think that is important? But just have a look at it and tell me, do you think GST will differentiate between the people based on their capability to pay taxes? Is it okay? Whether the person has $1 billion or the person has, let's say, 100 rupees, or the person has even 10 rupee, GST will be equal on all of them. 5 rupee, 5 rupee, 5 rupee if they purchase the good. So as a taxation, you are not worried about their capacity to pay the taxes. If their incomes are very high and if they pay 5 rupees, as a percentage of their total income, they have basically paid 0.0001% of their income as a tax. But for a person who is earning, let's say, 1,000 rupee, and if they pay 50 rupee tax out of 1,000 rupee, right, basically they have paid 5% of their income in the form of a taxation. So is it okay if I say, because the capability is not considered here, and the tax is imposed equally on all the consumers, then basically what is the idea here? Higher your income is, very, very small percentage tax liability will come on you. Is it okay? I'll repeat it again. Higher is your income, very small tax liability will come on you. That is the precise reason they will say indirect taxes are regressive in nature. Is it okay? Indirect taxes are regressive in nature. Okay, next one. Proportional taxation. Right? What is the idea of proportional taxation? Irrespective of your income. Okay, irrespective of your income, the tax rate will remain same. I'll repeat. Irrespective of your income, what is your income doesn't matter. Tax rate will remain same. Right? For example, in case of India, corporate tax rate, one type of a corporate tax rate is 22%. Right? A corporate tax rate in India is 22%. Again, 22% is there, 15% is there, and 30% is also there. Imagine all the companies adopt this corporate tax rate. They basically say, we will pay tax rate at this percent, that is 22%. So a company which earns 5,000 crore rupees will pay how much? 22% tax rate. A company B which earns 500 crore rupees will pay how much? 22% tax rate. Right? Don't you think in the context of this, because the tax rate is the same, right? Irrespective of incomes, the tax rate is same. It is basically a proportional type of a taxation. The tax rate will remain same. Your income doesn't matter. That is a proportional type of taxation. Okay, right? So one is a progressive, second one is a regressive, right? And the third one is proportional. Next is ad valorem and a specific type of a tax. Okay, ad valorem, right? A specific type of a tax. Now, what is the ad valorem tax? Simple. On the price of the product, right? Or on the value of the product, right? What is the value? What is the price of the product? Simple. Value means what is the price of the product. Whenever government will impose a tax on the value or the price of the product, such types of taxes are called as ad valorem taxes. Let me give a simple example. Imagine this bottle, price of the bottle is 100 rupees. Is it okay? I'll repeat it. Imagine price of the bottle is 100 rupees. If the government imposes a 10% tax on 100 rupee, right? Is it not as good as saying 10% tax is on the value or the monetary price of the product? So whenever, I repeat, whenever government imposes taxes on the value of the product, such taxes are called as ad valorem taxes. Best example is excise duty that is imposed by the government on some of the commodities in the market, or the earlier value added taxation, which is now a part of the GST, which is nothing but the part of the GST. For example, GST, right? What happens in GST? Simple. What happens in the GST? Imagine the price of the bottle is 100. GST is 5%. How do you calculate GST? 5% of 100 rupees is nothing but 5 rupees. Now tell me, is it not as good as saying tax has been imposed on the value of the product? So I'll repeat it again. Whenever the taxes are imposed on the value of the product, these types of taxes are called as ad valorem taxes. Best example is the VAT system, which has been subsumed under the GST now, or excise duty that is imposed by the government on some of the commodities, etc. But there is one more type of a taxation, specific taxes. Okay, one more type of a taxation, specific. Now the idea of a specific, understand this, these are the type of a taxes which are imposed on physical attributes of the product. Right, I'll repeat it. The specific type of taxes are imposed based on certain physical attribute, physical characteristic of a product. For example, I'll give you a current affairs example. Please understand it carefully. All of you have seen cigarettes. I will not ask you, do you smoke? Don't worry. All of you have seen cigarettes. Now, how many of you know that a tax on a cigarette is dependent on the length of the cigarette? The taxes that is imposed by the government on the cigarette is dependent on length of the cigarette. So cigarette, very, very bad example, right? Sunday evening, don't give me this example. Let me go to the next one, car. I hope you understand. Car. I'm pretty sure all of you have car, or all of you have seen cars. Some of you have purchased cars. Some of you own cars. Now, how many of you know that the tax rate on the car is dependent on length of the car? Understand this carefully. A tax rate on the car depends on length of the car. What is the length of the car determines what is the tax imposed by the government. And that is the precise reason, if you know the car market, they will simply say sub 4 meters. There is a division in the car market which is called as a sub 4 meters. Right? Why? The length of the car, if it is less than 4 meters, if the length of the car is less than 4 meters, tax rate is different. If the length of the car is more than 4 meters, tax rate is much higher. So again, the argument is simple here. Whenever the government will impose taxes based on physical characteristic of a product, based on physical attributes of the product, such a tax is called as a specific taxation. Any difficulty? One is ad valorem, that is basically on the value of the product. Right? Let me give you a simple example. Two situations. Follow this carefully. Two situations. The value of the flask, that is the price of the flask, is 100 rupee. If government will impose 5% on 100 rupee, that is called as ad valorem. Done? Any problem in understanding this? This is clear? Ad valorem. Second, government will say length of the bottle, right? Length of the bottle is, let's say, 2 meters. I will impose a tax of, let's say, 50 rupees. And government says, if the length of the bottle is more than 2 meters, I will impose a tax of 75 rupees. Now, simple question to you people. In the second example, don't you think the government is imposing a tax on the physical characteristic of a product? That is either the length of the product or height of the product or volume of the product, etc. So whenever the government imposes taxes on the physical attributes of the product like this, it is called as a specific taxation. It is called as specific taxation. Best example is taxation imposed on cars. In fact, I'll give you current affairs. All of you heard of Volkswagen company, VW. Volkswagen, VW, right? Volkswagen. Some of you will say, sir, it is Volkswagen, but it's a German company, Volkswagen. Right? The Volkswagen company had a very, very nice product in the international market. VW Polo. It's a hatchback car, right? Sub 4 meters. One of the variants of Polo, the length of the car went beyond 4 meters. Simple. The length of the car went beyond 4 meters. And because the length of the car went above 4 meters, government taxes on this car would be higher. And I hope you understand, if the tax rate is higher, automatically the market price would simply be higher. I hope you understand. And because of that higher length, more than 4 meters, taxes went up, market prices went up, right? The demand for the car went down. And Volkswagen basically stated, I will not be anymore selling that variant of Polo car in the Indian market. Right? Again, will UPSC ask you, right, what happened in the context of Polo? What happened in the context of Volkswagen car? Don't worry, UPSC will not ask you that. But whenever the government will impose a tax on, let's say, length or the height or let's say volume like this, these taxes are called as specific type of taxes. Okay. Next, surcharge or cess. Just for understanding physical feature, does color can also be used? Generally, government doesn't use color, but again, in the future, if the government wants to do, they can do that. But right now, we generally use length as a parameter, volume as a parameter to impose taxes. Okay. Next, surcharge and cess. Okay, surcharge and cess. Now follow this very carefully. Surcharge and cess, both are types of taxes. Is it okay? I'll repeat it. Surcharge and cess, both are type of taxes only. But the difference is very simple. Surcharge is an additional tax that is levied over existing tax rates. I'll give you example. Please wait. I'll connect it to current affairs as well. Whereas a cess is a tax that is imposed and collected by the government to achieve specific objective. This is very, very important. I'll repeat it again. Surcharge and cess both are types of taxes only. Surcharge is imposed and collected whenever income crosses a certain threshold. I'll give an example. In India, if your income is up to 50 lakh rupees, taxable income is up to 50 lakh rupees, tax rate will be, let's say, 30%. But the moment the taxes, the moment your taxable income goes above 50 lakh rupees, government says pay 30% income tax. But in addition to this 30%, I will impose one more tax on you. That is called as surcharge. You will have to pay income taxes, plus you will also have to pay surcharges. Any difficulty, please let me know now. Because very recent in the budget, if you have heard to the announcement by the finance minister, surcharge rates have been reduced. Is it okay? Surcharge rates have been reduced. And there is a question, sir, how much is a surcharge? My dear, when it is from 50 lakh to 1 crore, there is a different rate. 1 crore to 2 crore, different rate. 2 crore to 5 crore, different rate. More than 5 crore, a different rate. Right? Should you remember 5 rates of surcharges not needed? Please go ahead. Right? So the argument is simple. You will have to pay the income taxes, but in addition to the income taxes, you will also have to pay extra taxes, which is called as a surcharge. What about the cess? It is also a tax. Okay, it is also a tax. But whenever a cess is imposed, government has to say for what purpose they are collecting the cesses. I'll repeat it. I'll give you example. Please wait. Right? Government will impose and collect the tax, but government has to define for what purpose they are collecting the cess. I'll give you a simple example. There is a cess called as education cess. Now, if you followed the discussion, let me ask you a very simple question. Imagine government of India has imposed education cess and it has collected 100 crore rupees. Okay? Government has imposed education cess and collected 100 crore rupees. Now just think of it and answer, can government use this 100 crore rupees to construct a road? Is it possible? Just have a look at it. Can government of India, before collecting cess, tell you, right, I'm going to collect this tax for education purposes. After they have collected cess, they'll say, I will use it for construction of road. Is it possible? Answer is no. Answer is simply no. Why? For whatever specific reason they have implemented cess, and remember this also, for implementing cess, the government of India has to get authority from parliament. Right? I hope you understand this. All of these are announced during the budget. Why? They introduce bills in the parliament, get the approval, they get the permission from the parliament. So you have told parliament that you will collect money for promotion of education. Now you want to use the funds for something else. Do you think it is allowed? Answer is no, it will not be allowed. So understand the logic here. Both are the types of taxes only. In one case, that is surcharge, it comes in addition to the existing taxes. And the objective of imposing surcharge is very simple. I want to reduce income inequality further. I hope you understand this. I want to reduce income inequality further. That is, higher the income, you'll have to pay a higher amount of surcharge. Now look at this very carefully, think of it and let me know whether I'm correct or wrong. Surcharge are nothing but a type of progressive taxes only. I'll repeat it. Surcharges are nothing but types of progressive taxes only. Why? Higher the income, higher the surcharge you pay. Right? If you're earning an income of 10 lakh rupees, is there a surcharge? No. 20 lakh rupees? No. If your taxable income crosses more than 50 lakh rupees, then government says, right, give me more. Right? Government simply says, dil mange more, please give me more taxes. Right? In fact, in addition to the surcharges, highest rate of taxation is how much? 30%. And if you keep on adding surcharges, right, in case of India, until very recently, the highest amount of taxation went up to 42%. That's a very, very high rate. Right? Along with the surcharges plus income taxes, highest rate of taxation in India went up to 42%. Right? That was a very high rate. In fact, that is the reason why Finance Minister very recently in the budget announced that I will reduce the surcharge. Okay, so surcharge and cess. Now let me add one more component. Follow this very carefully. Now all of you know, right, there is income tax. Right, if you earn income, certain part of the income you will have to give it to government. There is a corporate tax. Again, companies which earn profit, part of the profit they will give to government. Now, why I am talking about income tax, corporate tax here, reason is very simple. These types of taxes are imposed and collected by the central government. Again, sir, only two? No, of course no. There are multiple types of taxes. But understand this point very carefully. These are types of taxes which are having pan-India nature. Pan-India means throughout India, these can be imposed and collected. These types of pan-India taxes are imposed and collected by the central government. Sir, why is the central government collecting it? Reason is very simple. All of you have heard of Constitution of India? Anybody in the class who says, sir, what is Constitution of India? All of you heard of Constitution of India? In the Constitution of India, what Constitution has done is, it has basically divided the powers between the center and the state. There is a part of the Constitution, very famous, called as 7th Schedule of the Constitution. 7th Schedule. And what happens under the 7th Schedule is, the Constitution will divide the taxation powers between the central government as well as the state government. For example, only state government until very recently, I hope you understand this, only state government until very recently was allowed to impose sales tax, was allowed to impose VAT system. Again, don't have a heart attack looking at VAT, sales, etc. Next week we'll discuss that. Please don't worry. And if you talk about, let's say, service tax, if you talk about income tax, corporate tax, which is the authority which has been given the power to impose and collect these taxes? Central government. Now, simple question to you people. Central government will impose and collect income tax and corporate tax. And in fact, if you see, large sum of tax revenues are generated under income as well as corporate taxes. Now, do you think, because the central government is given the power to impose and collect, what do you think? Only central government should be allowed to use the amount of taxes, or some of it should be given to states also? Just think of it. Right? What do you think? Because the center has imposed and collected, and again, some of you are not participating. Not some of you, many of you have stopped participating. Start. Last 15 minutes are there. Right? Last 15 minutes are there. Be happy now. You are at the fag end. Be happy. So understand the logic here. As per the Constitution, central government is allowed to impose and collect these tax revenues. But should only the central government utilize this? Of course, no. That will be injustice for the states. So what generally happens is, central government will impose and collect, but part of these taxes will be given away to the states. Right? How much will go to states, how much percentage, etc., we will understand it next week when I take up Finance Commission. Is it okay? Next week when I take a Finance Commission, I will tell you how much part of the taxes central government has to give away to the state governments. But what is the point I'm trying to make here? Simple. Whenever the central government has been given the right to impose these kind of taxes and collect and provide part of it or distribute part of it to the state, certain types of taxes will not be counted here. For example, surcharges are imposed and collected by the central government. Cesses are imposed and collected by the central government. So remember this. The cesses and surcharges which are imposed and collected by the government, by default, the central government will not give anything to the states. It is entirely the prerogative. I repeat, it is entirely the prerogative, that is the power of the center to impose, collect, and if the center says, I will not give anything to the state, nobody can question them. Is it okay? Right? I hope you understand this. Why this was there in the newspapers? This was there in the newspapers very, very recently. The finance minister or the revenue minister of Tamil Nadu government has accused the central government of imposing and collecting lot of taxes in the form of cesses and surcharges. And what will happen because of this? The center no doubt will be able to collect more and more revenue, tax revenue, but none of it will go to states. Now the states are accusing the center. They are basically unhappy with this policy of the central government. Right? That is the importance of cesses and surcharges. Any doubts? Let me know. Right? Any doubts? Cesses and surcharges, both are types of taxation system only. Both are types of taxes. But the objective is different. Right? Both are imposed and collected by the government. And government doesn't have any compulsion to distribute any part of it to the states. If the center says all of it will be used by me, nobody can question them. Okay, last concept for the day, anti-dumping, countervailing and safeguard duties. Anti-dumping, countervailing, last concept. Right, let's have a look at all the three, then we'll stop the discussion. Right, anti-dumping, countervailing and safeguard. But please understand this very carefully. Understand, because most of you feel all of them are one and the same. My dear, no, all of them are not one and the same. The context is very important. What is the meaning of context? Understand in which situation the taxes are imposed. That will make them different from one another. Let me start with the first one. Anti-dumping duty. Now, first and foremost, what do you mean by dumping? Imagine I'm a manufacturer in China. I will manufacture bottles to the rest of the world. To every other country that I export, I will export it at 100 rupees. But when I will export the bottle to India, I will export it at 97 rupees. Understand the context? Please don't miss the context. To the rest of the world, I will export it at 100. To India, I will export it at 97. Now, some of you will ask, why, sir? I will sell it to India, that is the buyers in India, at 97 rupees for a very simple reason. I don't want anybody else to compete with my product. I want my product to be the cheapest one in India so that all the buyers will purchase my product. What do you think will happen to other manufacturers in India? The sales of other manufacturers would be affected. Everybody agrees? Anybody who is unable to understand this, let me know. It's very, very simple. To rest of the world, I'll export it at 100. To India, I will export it at less than 100. Now, this activity is called as dumping. Is it okay? This activity, that is, you will reduce the price and export to a country, that is called as a dumping activity. Now, you are the Prime Minister, right? 750, I am making you the Prime Minister of India. Be happy. You are the Prime Minister and this is brought to your notice, right? The minister will come to you and say, sir, please have a look at it. From China, there is this fellow who is exporting the good at 95 rupees to India, but in rest of the world, he is selling it at 100 rupees. And the Prime Minister will ask, what is the problem then? Then the minister will tell the Prime Minister, because they are exporting at 95, they are very cheap in India. The other companies in India are not able to compete. So what will happen now? Please understand. Because this is classified as a dumping activity, because this is a dumping, I will try to reduce the dumping by imposing a tax which is called as anti-dumping duty. Is it okay? I will impose a tax which is called as anti-dumping duty. For example, the government of India will announce a tax on my product. That is, let's say they will announce a tax of 5 rupees. So I was exporting to India at 95. Now the government will impose a tax of 5, taking up the price to 100 rupees. Right? Does it make sense or not? Let me know. Right? Why it is done, sir? Because you have purposely suppressed the prices. You have reduced the prices and you are dumping the goods in the market. So in order to control the dumping activity, the government will impose anti-dumping duty. That's the first thing. Second one, countervailing duty. Let's take the same example. I'm a manufacturer in China. Again, assume I'm a manufacturer in China. I will manufacture the bottle. The actual cost at which I'm supposed to export is 100. Actual cost is 100. Government will give me a subsidy of 7 rupees. Right? For exporting the bottle, government will give me a subsidy of 7 rupees. A simple question to you people. If I receive 7 rupee, will I be exporting it at 100 rupees? Just think of it. Will I export the bottle to India at 100 rupees? No, I will reduce it. Right? Obviously, because 7 rupees I've already received. So what I'll do? I will export to India at, let's say, 93 rupees. Please understand the difference between 1 and 2. Don't say both 1 and 2 are same. Both are not same. In the first case, I am purposely reducing the price. In the second case, I am getting the subsidy from the government, hence I will reduce the price. Now, I will export this bottle to India at 93. What is the impact? Do you think other companies in India will be able to sell their bottles at 93 rupees? Not possible. Don't you think the demand for the bottles that I'm exporting will increase? I will be able to sell more and more bottles in India. Other companies in India will start suffering. So far, so good. Anybody has a problem? Please let me know. Now, Government of India will look at this policy or look at the problem and they will realize that I am able to export the bottle because I'm getting subsidy from the government. And what does the government do in India? To nullify or negate the benefit I'm getting, government will impose a duty called as a countervailing duty. And another name of countervailing duty is anti-subsidy duty. Anti-subsidy duty. Is it okay? Anybody who is sitting there who still thinks both anti-dumping and countervailing duties are one and the same, please let me know. Right, hardly 5 minutes are left out. Please do let me know. Anybody in the class who still says, sir, both are one and the same. Here also tax is imposed. Here also tax is imposed. The situation is different. In the first case, I am dumping. I am reducing prices. I am not getting any subsidy from the government. In the second case, I am getting the subsidy, hence I am reducing the prices. Is it okay? Right, that is the second one, countervailing duty. Third one is safeguard duty. Right, the third one is safeguard duty. What is the safeguard duty? Right, I'm using the latest technology. Right, understand this carefully. I'm a manufacturer sitting in China. I'm using latest technology. Now, simple question to you. If I'm able to get access to cheaper labor, cheaper raw material, better technology, don't you think naturally my product will be less costly? Just think of it. Right? I'm a manufacturer. I'm not getting subsidy. I'm not getting anything. Right? Nothing of that sort. I am able to get cheaper raw material. I am able to get good technology. I am able to get cheaper labor. As a result of this, don't you think the cost of production of this product automatically is lower? Is it okay? Automatically it is lower. So what could happen is the product might cost me 90 rupees. So I will export it to USA. Now understand this carefully. Because it is cheaper, don't you think the exports from China into India suddenly will start rising? Have a look at this. Because this product is competitive, it is cheaper. Don't you think the exports from one country into India, let's say from China into India, will suddenly start increasing? Because just like me, there is another company which is also manufacturing bottles in China. They will see, okay, India is a very good market. They will also manufacture, start exporting to India. Do you think that is going to benefit Indian manufacturers? If the imports will keep on flowing into India, Indian manufacturers will get the benefit. Answer is no. Foreign manufacturers will occupy the market. Indian companies will start suffering. Now, in that context, in order to promote production in India, in order to protect the manufacturers and promote production in India, government will impose a tax which is called as a safeguard duty. Government will impose an additional tax which is called as a safeguard duty. Please be very careful. All the three are not one and the same. Situation in each one of them will be different. I will repeat it for the last time in the day. Follow this. In the first case, cost itself is 100. To other countries, I will sell it at 100. When it comes to India, I will reduce it to 95 rupees. I will export it. When I reduce the price and export, this is called as dumping. Okay, when I reduce and export, this is called as dumping. And if I export it at 95 rupees, don't you think domestic companies would be affected because of it? If you are one more manufacturer in India, you are not able to sell it at 95. So my products will be sold more, your products will be sold less. In that case, government of India will impose a tax on me because I'm dumping. They will impose a tax on me so that the price of the product in the market will go up. This is called as anti-dumping duty. Second one is a countervailing duty. I am manufacturing the bottle, actual cost is 100. Government will give me subsidy, let's say 10 rupees. So when I receive subsidy, again you're basically applying GDP discussion, right? When you say, sir, how do I reduce the price? My dear, afternoon, didn't you discuss? If the cost is 100, government will give you a subsidy of 5, cost will automatically go down. That is exactly what I'm telling you now. Right? The cost is 100. I should have exported to India at 100, but government will give me a subsidy of 10. Will I still export it at 100? No, I will export it at less than 100, let's say 90 rupees. Now these products are cheaper in India. Demand for the products automatically will go up. Your products will not be sold. Now government of India will realize that because my government, that is, let's say Chinese government, is giving me subsidy, hence I'm able to sell it in India at a lower cost. So to negate, to basically cancel the advantage that I'm having of subsidy from the government of India will impose a tax on the bottle. Right? This is called as a countervailing or anti-subsidy duty. Third one is safeguard. No subsidy, nothing. I am using better technology. I am using cheaper labor. I am using cheaper raw material. Hence, bottle cost is 90. I will export it to India. And because this is much cheaper in India, I want to earn more and more profit. I want to increase my sale. I'll keep on exporting more and more products to India. So remember this, there is a sudden rise of imports into India. And when there is a sudden rise, because these are competitive products, the domestic companies would be affected. Government of India will impose a tax on this. Government of India will impose a tax on this product in order to protect domestic manufacturing and promote domestic manufacturing. That is called as a safeguard duty. So anti-dumping, countervailing, and safeguarding. Right? So these are the three different types of taxation which can be used by the government in order to protect the domestic companies. Okay, so we'll stop the discussion here. Next week, I'll start from this slide. That is basically discussion on direct taxes as well as indirect taxes. So in countervailing duty, one hand gives a subsidy and the other hand imposes countervailing duty. My dear, you're talking about two different countries. What is difficult in understanding this? China wants to promote exports, they will give me subsidy. Government of India doesn't want the imports to be cheaper, they will impose subsidy. What is difficult in understanding this? Both are different countries. Okay. Previous questions, we will take it up next week. Don't worry. Next year we will take, I'm sorry, not next year, next week we will take it up. Okay, any other question? Any other question? Or already fed up with economics? Hardly the end of first week. Okay, so have patience. Again, I'll tell you the same thing. Mantra is simple. Have patience. You cannot expect to become expert in all these topics at the end of a Saturday and Sunday. If that is your expectation, please, right, lower your expectations. Be realistic. How do we know subsidy is given by the other government? There's a slide here. Have a look at this. Under Government of India, there is one authority, DGTR, Directorate General of Trade Remedies, which functions under Ministry of Commerce. You are a manufacturer in India, you will go to this DGTR and file a complaint saying that this company from China, this fellow is getting subsidy and hence he is basically able to export more. DGTR will investigate, prepare a report, give it to Ministry of Finance. Ministry of Finance announces these duties. Okay. Any other question? Or should we stop the discussion? And anyways, time is over. I'll not be discussing any more concept. Right? Done then. No one is asking questions. Right? So whatever questions are there, subsidy given by their country. Right? Again, logic is simple. China is giving subsidy to me. Government of India is imposing taxes. That's it. Done. Okay. So here is an important point. We'll stop the discussion now. Here is a very important point. Please read whatever current affairs will come in the next 1 week in the newspapers. Please read. Even if you don't understand, don't worry. Please try to understand my point. Don't worry. You don't know what is GST. So article came on GST, sir, I could not understand. Don't worry, read it. Once next week when I take up GST and tell you, you will automatically realize, okay, what is the relevance of that article? Right? So whatever comes in the newspaper, don't worry. It is relevant to Indian economy. Read the article. As and when you cover these concepts, you will automatically start understanding what is the relevance of all of these articles. Okay, please read the newspaper. Do not skip reading newspapers. Right? So revise, update, right? And again revise. That's the only simple mantra. Please follow that. Done then. So that's it from my side. We'll stop the discussion here. Right? We will take up the discussion. We'll carry forward the discussion from the types of taxes from the next week. That is Saturday, 12 p.m. I'll see you again. Thank you. Take care. See you next week.